morning, folks, and welcome to another edition of City Hall Live. I am Joe Abeta, and today joining us is the mayor for the city of Santa Fe, Mayor Alan Weber. Mayor, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Doing good, Joe. Nice to see you. Here's coffee with Joe every morning.
Yes, no, thank you so much. I have a lot of questions to ask you today, so let's just get right into it. We started out this year normal, right? And we're ending it a little different than what we expected. The pandemic hit us in February. Became a real serious thing in March. What's one thing out of looking back, what's one thing that you've learned about our community during this whole process, during this whole year?
Great question. And if ever there was a year that deserves reflection
Mhm.
and taking stock, 2020 is it. It's going to go down in history as one of those years that people remember, they think about for a long time because it changed everything. COVID touched all of our lives.
Mhm.
I think the most important lesson that I learned and that we should all constantly reflect on and think back on is what a resilient community Santa Fe is.
Mhm.
This is a city that cares about each other. People really look after each other.
Mhm.
It's not just the city government,
Mhm.
it's nonprofits, it's faith groups, it's families stepping up to look after each other. I look back at March, as you said, that's kind of when the alarm bells started ringing loudest
Mhm.
and the whole community mobilized. I remember going over to Christus, and they were already setting up a special section of the hospital to take care of COVID patients.
Mhm.
Um, the city government stood up an emergency shelter at Midtown in about a week and a half, 2 weeks,
Mhm.
to take care of people who are experiencing homelessness and to reduce the population at our shelters who were very much at risk.
Mhm.
People reacted quickly. They reacted with real focus and strength and purpose, and it lasted. It's going on right now. We're still watching volunteers feed hungry people in our community, shelter hungry people in our community, take care of people who need emergency health care or keep their lights on.
Mhm.
This is a loving, caring, compassionate city, and we always have been, but in a crisis, people really rose to the occasion and looked after each other. And that's going to stay with us after COVID is gone. That lesson that we're all connected and we're all one community, that's
Mhm.
going to stick. That's going to be part of what heals us in 2021.
Now, let's look at it from a nuts and bolts type of perspective. You, as the mayor, trying to, first of all, um, get a game plan going of how are we going to attack this? How are we going to respond to this? There's things that we've had on the burner for a while that we wanted to get going, and I'm just using this as an example, like we had building permits that we wanted to be able to continue with, and we had been thinking about how we apply for a building permit online. How are the kiddos going to be affected school wise? Are we going to need to, and the libraries and our services? Um, and I know that homelessness has always been an issue in Santa Fe that we always need to address that, right? Because it's an evolving thing. But how did that all play out? I mean, as far as rallying the troops here, the staff, the city staff, and also with a overshadowing of possibly this is going to cause a deficit, that we're looking at budget wise. How did that all play out?
Yeah.
If you can explain that.
That's a question that's probably better served with an hour-long video
No, yeah, I got
documentary.
you. I got you. Yeah.
Because that's really, when you think back, and when we think back to the responses to COVID, there are a number of different components. One is, how does the city government keep functioning
Mhm.
under a public health emergency unlike anything we've ever seen?
Yeah.
And then how do we take care of the needs of our people?
Mhm.
And then how do we keep our businesses going at a time when our economy is really suffering because
Yeah.
COVID shut everything down?
Mhm.
The part you're touching on really is something that the people who work for the city, our employees, our managers, our city manager, they
Mhm.
deserve an enormous amount of credit.
Mhm.
Um, one thing that strikes me as you ask the question, there's an old saying, the time to fix the roof is before it starts raining.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think people in Santa Fe should take a great deal of pride in the fact that for the last 2 years before COVID hit, we were
Mhm.
doing things that really put us in a position so we could continue to run a strong and capable city government despite a public health crisis and an economic crisis
Mhm.
unlike anything we've ever seen.
Mhm.
We started implementing an electronic system for e-permitting before we needed it. We started implementing electronic signatures to do away with paper inside city government before we needed it. So when COVID hit and we sent our workers home and gave them equipment, technology, laptops, so they could work effectively from home,
Mhm.
as many as possible.
Mhm.
When we recognized that the governor was going to allow construction to go on as an essential activity, our land use department could issue e-permits and
Mhm.
continue to build housing in our community and have people have jobs and get
Mhm.
paychecks.
Mhm.
When we closed the libraries, but our brilliant librarians figured out they could do electronic book downloads and curbside deliveries and story time. That was brilliant. That
Mhm.
was innovation. That was creative problem solving in the middle of a crisis. But we were ready for it because there'd been investments in the technology, in the management systems, even in our budgeting process, so that we could pass a budget. We went through 3 budgets in the course of the post COVID crisis
Mhm.
and ended up with a budget that was balanced, with no layoffs, with no people taking salary cuts other than a few top managers.
Mhm.
We were able to keep everybody employed, and we were facing a projected $70 million budget shortfall. That's because of the talent that works for the city of Santa Fe. That's
Mhm.
because of a team of people who worked across departments to collaborate and find a way to get essential city services delivered without subjecting either our city employees or our residents to the risk of COVID. And that's an amazing achievement. And it really deserves recognition on the part of our giving the employees and our managers their due, because I don't think there's any other city that rose to the occasion the way Santa Fe did.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's kind of like, and this is kind of a Joe analogy, but like when astronauts go up, they always test these things, right? There's technology that's created for astronauts when they're up in space. Like, a real famous one is Tang and Teflon, right? And then they bring it down here and they make it like, something that we can use in our daily lives, correct? And this right here, this situation of COVID, and this is where I bring it back to the real life here, is that with us, with the city, that we have figured out a way of doing something in a new way that's more efficient. And it then, when we go back to post COVID days, we could still use this. We don't have to throw this out. We could still use it and be more efficient, or just as efficient as we were before, with a little bit less guidelines of COVID, but still use it. Much like what we're doing right now with Zoom. We're
Yeah.
having this interview right now. You're at your house, I'm at mine, and we're doing a show. um, and we use this, say, for, you want to set up a meeting with the city employee. Instead of coming from the south side all the way down to meet somebody, you can meet that person now on Zoom and be more efficient, meet more people every day, correct?
Yeah, I think, there's nothing to like about COVID. I mean,
Yeah.
COVID has been, it's cost people lives.
Yes. Yes.
We've seen people lose their jobs. We've seen families suffer. So there's nothing good about COVID.
Yes.
But what's good is the resiliency of people in Santa Fe and the creativity of people in positions of responsibility across
Mhm.
our community who
Mhm.
figured out ways to collaborate, cooperate, and solve problems. And you're right, some of it one of the most basic things in any crisis that they teach you in leadership training programs
Mhm.
is communicate, communicate, communicate.
Mhm.
Well, if we hadn't had the ability, and you and Christine Mihalsik and others deserve the credit for putting on city council meetings through Zoom.
Mhm.
People can tune in, they can watch, they can listen,
Mhm.
they can actually participate through Zoom technology. The same applies to the creativity in finding ways to feed people. The community
Yep.
college opened up its kitchen,
Yep.
worked with local chefs, worked with students in the program for culinary arts. They put out what 100,000 meals
Wow.
to
Mhm.
feed hungry people in Santa Fe. Now that facility was there, but we never thought of it in terms of responding to a crisis.
No.
And so the combination of a facility, the technology, and then the innovation, the creativity, and the problem solving energy that has been manifest across the city
Mhm.
really meant that we found new ways to get things done. And once COVID 19 is in the rearview mirror, we're going to keep doing those things. We'll continue to issue e permits and build housing and remodel buildings efficiently with much less wear and tear on people having to drive downtown to get a building permit. And I also think we'll continue to see ways to do outreach to all parts of our community. You've been helping me for the last 9 months do a regular meeting with a task force of community leaders and community uh, advocates on a weekly and then a biweekly basis to spread knowledge and information from
Mhm.
our healthcare professionals to our nonprofits to our faith leaders to our community business leaders. We should have been having those meetings all along.
Mhm.
And we started them because there was a crisis, but we're not going to stop them once the crisis is over. We're going to continue to find ways to connect with each other, find ways to share information more effectively, and build a much more tightly knit way of solving problems where everybody's ideas matter and we can listen to and learn from each other. So I hate COVID. I hate what it's done to people and their families.
Mhm.
I'm grateful, enormously grateful to all the ways people have pitched in together to solve problems and not let COVID beat us because we're really proving that we can overcome COVID every single day.
On that note of solving problems, me being the producer behind the city council meetings, noticing that the governing body and yourself have had to rethink some things to make things a little bit more easier for people to be able, just like outdoor dining was a huge one, right? How's that process been for you guys? I mean, I've been aware of it, but kind of if you could just give maybe the people watching right now, um, maybe
Uh,
a peek into
I,
that, the problem
yeah,
solving with that with
I,
you and the
I
governing body.
so I think about one of the jobs of city government. One of the things we're supposed to do for people is help them make it through these kinds of hard times.
Mhm.
Another is to continue to deliver to the best of our ability in challenging health and financial times, the
Mhm.
essential services that people depend on.
Mhm.
But the part that I'm most proud of when it comes to our city team is
Mhm.
the ability to find creative solutions that never have been thought of before,
Mhm.
and then to execute them. So
Mhm.
you mentioned the librarians, brilliant group of people who figured out how do we keep our kiddos both educated and entertained? Well,
Mhm.
let's have story time.
Mhm.
And you and I did a lot of readings from Winnie the Pooh
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
Uh, and I love Winnie. Winnie the Pooh is a book I grew up on.
Mhm.
I still have the copy that my family had when I was an 8-year-old boy.
Yeah.
Uh, and to have the ability to use technology to be reading stories to our kiddos at home, it's fun, it's imaginative, and it's the heart and soul of city government, not just the operations of city government.
Mhm.
The same goes for other innovations, like you mentioned, outdoor dining. Well, it became clear very quickly that Santa Fe's restaurants were at risk. They
Mhm.
still are. We're not out of the woods. We've got to
Yeah.
continue to do takeout and help local mom and pop restaurants and retailers make
Mhm.
it through COVID.
Mhm.
But we saw that with an extension of the restaurant permit to go outdoors, to occupy parking spaces, to set up tents and add more tables,
Mhm.
they could comply with the governor's order that shut down indoor dining, but
Mhm.
still have jobs and income for people in the restaurant and tourist industry to
Mhm.
keep that part of our economy going. Well, how did that happen? Doesn't happen overnight. It happens when Randy Randall of tourism and when Yolanda V. Hill, the city clerk,
Mhm.
and Eli Isaacson in land use and others pool their talents together as a team and
Mhm.
figure out how to get the permits through the process so the restaurants can continue to operate and people can make a living. And I saw that across city government. I saw it with people bringing us ideas, and we would do our very best to implement them. We tried to think like chess players. What
Mhm.
what what are one or two moves we can think of
Mhm.
ahead so we get there before COVID has crushed either the economy or a family or caused healthcare crisis so our hospitals were jammed up. The Santa Fe Promise was a step toward thinking one or two moves ahead.
Yeah, let's
How do
talk
we?
about that. I want to,
Okay,
yeah, about
good.
the Santa Fe Promise. Go ahead, Mary. I want you to, we talk about that. You used words like compassion, empathy, connection, respect, and love. And we need a lot of that right now. Even when you're waiting in line in the grocery store, um, and that's what the Santa Fe Promise encompasses. Can you please, yeah? So tell us a little bit about that Santa Fe Promise.
Well, it became, so what we saw in early March was a looming crisis. And we were
Hmm.
already getting very clear advice from public health experts here and in the country.
Hmm.
There are basic things we all need to do. We still need to do them, right? We need to keep our mask close by and
Yeah.
our hand sanitizer and don't take trips you don't need to take.
Hmm.
City council and I were very clear from the get-go, putting out emergency proclamations, talking to our supermarket leaders. What are the protocols that we need to do in
Hmm.
order to keep people safe? But one thing that we all know is that campaigns and logos and slogans connect with people in a way that an emergency proclamation will never do.
Hmm.
So we came up with the idea of a Santa Fe promise, which was basically each of us taking personal responsibility. I promise to act as if I have COVID 19. But
Hmm.
once you start acting as if you have it, you change the way you behave. You do practice physical distancing. You
Hmm.
do wear your face mask. You do stay home if you don't have to go out.
Hmm.
I promise to do what you said, Joe, to be patient at a time when everybody is stressed out. I promise to be basically to love my neighbor as myself,
Yeah.
even when we're struggling against a pandemic. We found a volunteer who is a young man who grew up in Santa Fe, is a talented art uh, and marketing guy, currently
Mhm.
lives in Amsterdam,
Yeah.
and and for free designed us this beautiful logo of
Hmm.
the Santa Fe Promise. We created a marketing campaign to carry the Santa Fe Promise out onto the plaza and in shops and stores with a pin you could wear, all of which was designed to say we're all in this together,
Hmm.
and we can bend the curve if we all take care of ourselves and each other. And it worked. And now we're on to Santa Fe Promise 2.0. We
Hmm.
realize that there are two zip codes that are the most heavily hit by COVID. We need to extend extra help to those folks. We need to make sure they get free masks, free hand sanitizer, free Wi Fi connection so they can have their kiddos go to school or they can look for a job or get help when they need it,
Hmm.
sign up for the Connect program. all of this stuff came out of the minds, the hearts, the spirit of the people who work for the city and the people who live in the city who signed up to look after each other and be family for each other despite the most difficult pandemic any of us has ever faced.
I want to switch gears a little bit. Um, and one of the questions that I have for you is, what was one of the most humbling experiences? I know, it could be there was a lot of things that happened, and there was a lot of good, but there was some bad that did happen during this time, and some of it may be fueled by our national temperature that was going on at the time, the climate that was going on, in our nation, that kind of played a part in our small community of Santa Fe. Um, so let's talk about that. What stands out to you? I mean, as far as those events that did happen, how did they affect our community? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, Joe, you are a very talented videographer and movie maker. And I think of the year gone by, if we were to do one of those old fashioned newsreels
Mhm.
that used to be in the movies, you
Yeah.
know, news of the week in review with
Yes.
that great voice.
Yes.
If you see the old black and white newsreels, if we did a newsreel of 2020,
Hmm.
some of the highlights, some of the optimism would be fired by the way our community responded to the health crisis, the financial crisis,
Hmm.
the social crisis of COVID.
Hmm.
But every newsreel has its tragedies and
Hmm.
its sadnesses and its unpleasantnesses, the things we regret that we feel bad about.
Hmm.
Um, Obviously, the most serious regret is the lives that we lost to COVID.
Hmm.
Those are people we'll never get back.
Hmm.
And I got emails. We all have friends and family who have lost people in their lives,
Hmm.
in their families, and those are people we should not ever uh, lose sight of.
Hmm.
And I think we'll look back on it and we'll think that those people are really a tragic loss nationally and in our community.
Hmm.
Two other things stand out for me. One is the loss of life of four of our young people to gun violence.
Hmm.
Uh, we all know our, you know, star athlete and his tragic death by gun violence, but there were three others who were perhaps less prominent, didn't necessarily end up uh, with the publicity or the recognition, but every life lost is a tragedy, and
Yeah.
it was kids killing kids,
Hmm.
and that's something we need to take to heart. I did reach out to the community of families on the South Side where some of this took place. We had some Zoom meetings. I went over with Counselor Abeda to a meeting in the parking lot near the South Side Library to talk about recognizing lives lost and how the young people in Santa Fe are too important and too treasured
Hmm.
to let violence take them from us. Our police department did an outreach to some of the young kids who might be making bad life choices and to offer them job training and counseling and ways to avoid that uh, path that leads you to potential uh, bad decisions. But four lives lost is too many,
Yeah.
and we need to build the Southside Teen Center. We need to continue to do counseling, mentoring, um, job training. And 2021, one of the ways we heal is to reach out to our young people. The
Yeah.
other thing that obviously stands out, you know, you talk about the national mood and the national divisiveness in our country.
Hmm.
Uh, we had a summer of demonstrations over Black Lives Matter. We had demonstrations with Cowboys for Trump. We had people showing up on the plaza with open carry weapons. We had marches on all sides of this very divided country,
Hmm.
with voices of anger and voices of division. And for the most part, people expressed their opinion. Our officers, the state police as well, county sheriff, kept the peace. But on Indigenous Peoples Day, I think we all know that things got out of hand. There was a group of people who came to the plaza intent upon tearing down the obelisk. And I had been very candid in saying that as far as the obelisk uh, represented a monument where there was words on it that were racially insensitive to Native Americans, I favored moving it, keeping it intact, but moving it and turning it into a history lesson.
Hmm.
So we could study the history of Santa Fe, the history of northern New Mexico, respect all the different histories that come together here in our diverse community. And unfortunately, the obelisk was torn down rather than moved and kept safe for a history lesson.
Hmm.
And we're still dealing with the aftermath of that event. It really tore apart parts of our community. There are people on many different sides of that piece of monumental statue, people who respect it because it was part of their lives growing up, people who think it was a monument to racism and it needed to be moved and taken away. There are people in the middle who say, well, we should have kept it and rededicated it with a different version of history or more versions of history.
Hmm.
What we've seen in America too often is that the voices of division are the loudest,
Hmm.
and the voices of consensus and cooperation and peacemaking get drowned out.
Hmm.
And for 2021, I'm hoping that we can adopt a process where grassroots, democratic, inclusive conversation among everybody in Santa Fe, all parties, whether you've been here for 16 generations or your people were here before even 16 generations, or you came very recently, but you love our community and our city and you
Hmm.
want to be part of healing.
Hmm.
A community dialogue about history and culture that respects everybody, respects all points of view, lowers the temperature, increases the listening, and finds a way to heal our community and send a signal that Santa Fe is a place where diversity, respect, and shared values are much more deeply held than the few things where we disagree. So it it was a major wound.
Hmm.
Uh, it was a gut punch for all of us. I think. I don't think violence is ever the right way to solve a problem. I think discussion and engagement and community dialogue is how we solve our differences and find ways forward. I think it's a reminder that the kind of community response to COVID, where we all helped each other, is the right way to respond to social justice issues as well. There are many more ways to work together to find shared values than to find the loud voices of anger that divide us.
Well, and I think that it's a teaching moment for us as a community, right? A learning moment more than a teaching moment, maybe both. Um, we deal with something like this, something happens like this to us in our community, and I think it brings out uh it can make things better for us in the future. How are we going to process this? How are we going to deal with this as a community in the future? If something comes up, do we understand each other better because of this? Is there a silver lining that after the dust settles, is there a silver lining that we're going to get out of this, that we're going to move on and become a better and stronger, more accepting community of other people's cultures? Because Santa Fe, as you know, and me growing up there in Santa Fe, it's just, there's so many different cultures, and even more now so than when I was a kid there, and because people love our community. That it could be the food, it could be the spirituality, the culture, the heritage, the buildings, the way it smells. all that stuff, right? And it's just something, you know, I hope that we as a community take this and get the silver lining of to understand each other more, to be a happier and more peaceful place to, and continue to be a peaceful place to live.
Yeah, you make a very good point, Joe. I think, um, look, 2020 was a hard year,
Uh-huh.
and one of the hard parts of it was COVID, but another hard part of it were the demonstrations around our country, the people throwing rocks at each other in
Yeah.
some cities, people tearing down uh, buildings, uh, losing a sense of community. Now we have had our fabric frayed but not torn.
No.
There are too many deep commitments in our community, too much belief in each other, too much faith in Santa Fe, too much love for Santa Fe for
Mhm.
the fabric to be torn. We are all in this together. Uh, but we have historically, uh, in times of disagreement, not looked each other in the eye and always told the truth.
Mhm.
There was an article in the New Mexican last week about the debate over the obelisk going back to the early 1970s, and a group on the whole city council voting unanimously to move the obelisk because they didn't want to offend the native community. It
Mhm.
didn't happen because the conversation never coalesced around a plan of community engagement.
Mhm.
So 2020, with the police violence in other communities, with police killing black men and women in other cities. We didn't see that in Santa Fe. We did see marches, we did see demonstrations, and we saw the obelisk toppled by a small group of people.
Yeah.
Now it's up to us to step into that moment and
Yep.
to be the city of faith that says we care enough about each other to tell the truth to each other and to be honest with each other, not out of anger, but out of love.
Yeah.
Now, I'm sitting here in my study, Joe. If
Uh-huh.
you, I know your camera's not good enough, but if you looked at the books on my bookshelf,
Yeah.
they're histories of Santa Fe and northern New Mexico,
Yeah. Yeah.
because the history of this place that we call home is so remarkable in so many ways.
Mhm.
And we ought to celebrate that history, even though part of it is painful,
Mhm.
part of it is tragic, part of it is violence on all sides against each other. That's the human condition.
Mhm.
And the more honest we are with each other as humans and look each other in the eye and say, look, we all have faults. There have been a lot of sins committed on all sides, and yet we found a way to live with each other for hundreds and hundreds of years. And now in 2021, how do we make it even better?
Yeah.
How do we actually heal old wounds, show deep respect and love for each other, and come out of it with a renewed sense of the spirit, the heart of Santa Fe? I think that's what people in Santa Fe really want.
No, absolutely. And I just want to say, and not being a company guy, not sounding like a company guy, with the city and stuff, because the city's been great to me, um, personally and professionally. But I remember, after, the whole the plaza thing and the obelisk and everything that happened with that. And then there was this moment that we had that it was unexpected. I think because we had Zozobra virtually, we've had many virtual celebrations, but the one thing that everybody has really grown is the plaza lighting, right? The lights at the plaza. And so this year we made it a drive-by, and we put it on on YouTube for people to listen to watch, with Kiswave playing the Christmas music and stuff. And we were there and we were setting up for it. And it was pretty amazing because we didn't let the bad stuff influence how we felt about something, that we still were able. It was like we all came together as a community at the end of that movie that happens, and we all started Christmas caroling together, and we all came together in the end. And I felt that way for the plaza drive by, because it started to snow really lightly and heavy in some points, but it was just that moment where people were able to go down to the plaza and enjoy it, and it was peaceful and everybody loved it, and it was just an awesome magical moment for me. And I think about that night, and I kind of think I took a little bit for granted, and I wish I would have really relished the moment at that time because it was just so special. and and that's part of our healing. That played a part of our healing as a community coming together. So, I don't want to bumble on a little on that or anything, but just from my own personal experience, that really was a healing moment for me, a sign of healing for us as a community.
I think everything you say is right, Joe.
Mhm.
There are so many touchstones of history and culture and community, and COVID had had us change things a little bit,
It did.
right? We had to adapt. We couldn't do it the way we've always done it, but in doing it differently, we
Hmm.
appreciate it maybe even more
Hmm.
because it's a reminder of how deep these roots go
Hmm.
and how much affection there is in this community for our city and for everybody who lives here.
Yeah.
And so you're right. The lights on the plaza were magical. The virtual zozobra burning
Hmm.
that got beamed to countries all over the world,
Yeah.
and every state in America tuned into something that we love doing. We couldn't do it the way we always do it. We
That's
uh,
right.
had to figure out a new way of doing it, to televise it. The Kiwanis did a brilliant job of staging it.
Hmm.
It was a reminder that there are some things that transcend even a pandemic, and what transcends a pandemic is love, and
Yes.
love of community, and embracing that sense of rich tradition and the things that make Santa Fe Santa Fe. You can't you can't really do smell-o-vision yet, so you couldn't smell the beautiful smells on the plaza or always get crystal clear sound. But the lights are gorgeous, and I'll tell you what else is gorgeous. Talking to the city workers who put the lights up,
Yeah.
how proud they were of the job they did, and it
Mhm.
was a gift they were giving to the city. These were the folks who get out there in the cold and in the night, and they're up on those cherry pickers and they're stringing the lights and making a decoration for the benefit of our entire city. And they don't get their names called out. They don't get a plaque.
No.
They do it because they love doing it, and
Yep.
they know it's a gift to Santa Fe.
And they were out there that night to make sure that everything was working right. They took pride in that, right? It was
Yep,
like putting out your going to a recital for your child. The plaza was their child, and they wanted to be there to support it, to make sure that everything went off right for the community, which is
absolutely.
very special.
And
Very,
they're
very
coaching me. They're the best part is they're coaching me now. Here's how here's how you click these clickers. Now don't click this one until you're ready. That's the one
yeah,
that really does it.
yeah.
They were like so protective of what they'd done
Mhm.
because they knew it was something that would touch everybody in the city. And they
Yes.
were right. People are still telling me this is the best plaza lighting ever. And I go down, even now, I go down and make sure it's still lit up and it's still beautiful.
Yeah. No,
That
absolutely.
that's an enduring part of our community.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Mayor, I know that we're coming short on time, and I wanted to ask you, now that we're coming up upon 2021, what's your thoughts on the upcoming year, man? What are you hoping for? What are you looking at here for 2021 for our city,
Yeah.
for the city of Santa Fe, and for the community of Santa Fe itself?
I think that that's something that, as mayor, I think about all the time. Where are we going, and what do we have to do to get there?
Mhm.
Um, we're obviously not out of the woods with COVID yet, so it's too early. Vaccinations are starting, but it's too early to declare victory.
Mhm.
So there's a part of us that all of us that has to be mindful of staying the course.
Mhm.
Continue, I come back to the mask and the hand washing and the protocols that keep us safe. Um, there's hope with vaccinations, but we're not there yet. So we've got to continue to take care of each other. We've got to find resources to help individuals and families who need food and shelter and rent. We've got to help our kids with school and learning and safety. All of that continues to be essential. We've got to help our mom and pop shops make it through the last stretch of this marathon. So when COVID is behind us, they're still here and making Santa Fe special. For the year ahead, there are a number of really important projects that I'm really looking forward to. We're going to break ground on the Southside Teen Center. And
Mhm,
I mentioned the teens we lost, the young people we lost. We can't lose any more.
mhm,
And one way we demonstrate our love and concern for our young people is to give them a world-class facility
mhm,
right across the street from the Southside Library, where they can have a place to learn and celebrate and put on shows and have food. And we're really caring for our young people.
mhm.
We're going to break ground on a downtown bathroom, Joe. And Randy Randall likes to joke it's 400 years in the making.
Oh, yeah.
We're finally going to have a public restroom where our visitors and our residents, when they're downtown and enjoying the plaza, they can have a public restroom. And it's going to get built. We're going to break ground out at the airport for a much more modern, user-friendly terminal. And that's a big step for recovering economically and making sure that tourists are welcome coming to town as we get beyond COVID. We're going to continue to modernize the things you talked about, the nuts and bolts of city government.
Mhm,
We're in the beginning stages of a reorganization that's going to make community engagement much more a part of our city, constant community engagement. Uh, the health and safety of our residents will be better served as we blend police and fire, community services and recreation. And the economy, recovering the economy is huge.
mhm,
Making sure people can earn a living, go back to work. We're seeing our tech sector grow. We've got to continue to nurture and bring back all of those iconic festivals and markets that we
mhm,
missed out on this
mhm,
summer.
mhm.
Housing, we've got about 3,000 units of housing in the pipeline. But as you said, Joe, homelessness continues to be a challenge. We're on our way toward the Built for Zero model, where we have zero chronically homeless people in our city. We're working on it. We're not there yet, but it
Mhm,
is a commitment that I see, again, the silver lining department with the Midtown shelter we stood up, with the Santa Fe Suites project that will add 125 affordable housing units to the city's housing stock. These are concrete steps. We'll add money to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund this year. All of these are important steps in the right direction. But the most important thing is to focus on recovery and healing.
mhm.
Recovery and healing. Those are the watchwords for 20 and 21. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to be continued effort from city government, working with the state. We've had great support from the governor and her team. The legislature has been generous. They gave us $17.5 million to help alleviate the impact of COVID in our community. That went out the door to families, to businesses, to people who needed help. Um, a great effort to take the sting out of COVID to the best of our ability. We're going to have to keep doing that in 2021. And always, Joe, always stay optimistic. Never count Santa Fe down. Never write Santa Fe off. Never think there's anything beyond the ability of Santa Fe and the people of Santa Fe to rise to the occasion, to help each other, to put on a great program, to show the rest of the country what a remarkable, attractive, fun, loving city this is. So, recovery, healing, optimism for 2021.
That's great. That's great, Mayor. Well, thank you so
Well,
much for spending some time with us.
thank you, Joe. I'd be remiss if I didn't say one last word about gratitude.
Okay.
Um, there's a friend of mine, a Benedictine monk named Brother David. Brother David's almost 100 years old.
Mhm.
He's still alive. His basic teaching as a Benedictine monk is gratitude. And one of his famous sayings is, uh, it isn't happiness that makes us grateful, it's
Mhm.
gratefulness that makes us happy.
Mhm.
And as we end 2020, which has been a hard year for all of us, we've been called upon to do hard things and we've done them. I think we ought to exit 2020 with an attitude of gratitude. I'm grateful to everybody. I'm grateful for the chance to be mayor. It is an honor and a privilege to be mayor of a city uh, like Santa Fe, unlike any place on earth. It is the best place on earth. And to be able to be mayor through challenging times, it is still the honor of a lifetime for me. And I think we should all be grateful that we live here and
Mhm.
grateful to each other. We're blessed to be here. We're
Mhm.
blessed to have each other. We're blessed to have a community of caring and loving people uh, where we look after each other. And so 2021 will be a better year, a happier year, a healthier year. But we can all be grateful even for 2020, not because it was a hard year, but because it showed us how much love there is in this community. The lesson learned is not that COVID was awful. The
Mhm.
lesson learned is even in a year with a pandemic and a financial crisis and a social justice call, we've been a city of love and a city of compassion. And that lesson of gratitude triumphs over all of the challenges of 2020.
Well, that's awesome. That's pretty cool. Thank you, Mayor, so much.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks for all your hard work. You are you are the city's videographer and storyteller, and we're very fortunate to have you with us. So thank you for all you do as well.
Well, thank you, and thank you for the opportunity too. Love doing it. It's awesome.
All right.
You have a happy new year, sir.
You too. I'll see you New Year's Eve, and I'll see you on the other side in 2021.
Awesome. Great.
Take care. Stay
Take,
safe.
take care. Folks, thank you for joining us. This has been City Hall Live. Have a safe week. Have a great week. Adios.